This is a Vessay, or video of a written essay, that is available on PLN's SCRBD page. The link to the written article is available in the YouTube video's description box. For a limited time, there will be weekly, semi-serious essays about behavioral technology and what could happen, what has happened, and what is happening. Whether you read the essays or watch the Vessay, hope you get something out of RX's musings on behavioral technology. This week's Vessay is Mass Quarantine.
Let's use the coronavirus pandemic as a backdrop for a new way of life. In this scenario, an effective treatment was found for the coronavirus, and a different virus has threatened to plague society. A quarantine is placed on America. No one is allowed to leave their homes for 3 days. Only CDC-approved government employees are allowed to patrol the streets in special gear to protect from the virus. The CDC decides to use grocery delivery services to get food, medication, and other necessities to people. People could order online and have their order delivered to their door by a CDC-approved employee, a type of public health officer, or PHO. Unfortunately, after a few days, the virus is still threatening, so the quarantine is extended to a week. This stresses the grocery delivery, so the CDC has decided to use drones to deliver groceries, medications, and other necessities. After a week, the virus is still a threat, but there are too many drones in the sky and people are getting cabin fever, so the CDC has decided to use remote-controlled motor carts that people can use to get their items. This lowers the amount of drones, and people have fun driving around town from their homes through their remote-controlled carts with a driver's cam so they could see where it's going. After about 3 weeks, the virus is less threatening, but to avoid a relapse of the threat, the CDC has mapped out areas so that people can leave their homes, but must remain in certain areas so that if there is an outbreak, the area can be quarantined quickly to avoid a plague. People can go out, but must stay within their CDC-approved region. There's one outbreak, and it was controlled quickly by shutting down the region. However, further safety measures were put in place, requiring people to buy self-driving cars so that their location could be monitored and controlled because a few people in the infected region decided to leave their region and infected a different region. The self-driving cars can be controlled and taken over by the CDC if a person from an infected region tries to leave that area. This works, and soon a cure is found for the virus and everyone is free to roam as they please. Some people actually liked the quarantine's new way of life, and others even applauded it, not only as a remedy for a pandemic, but also as a lifestyle option. This led to some wanting to continue living that way, and a new way of life is now available to society. At first, it is voluntary, but then some psychopaths get into authoritative government roles and decide to use it to control the public. The psychopaths use computers to develop a new disease that will allow them to enforce the quarantine. They didn't want to use hard-to-control natural viruses, so they made computer-operated ones that they could remotely control. The psychopaths reasoned that no one would die from the nanovirus. They'll just use it to have an excuse to mass quarantine the public. Things get out of hand, food starts to be rationed, there are too many restrictions, and American freedom is gone. The scenario was not meant to vilify or make the CDC look bad. The CDC is the government agency that is responsible for controlling the spread of disease, so that is the main reason it was used. I thought the CDC recommendations during the coronavirus scare were appropriate and proactive considering the danger involved. It's hard to write an analysis of the whole coronavirus crisis while it is still occurring. Things change every day, so the facts today may not be the facts tomorrow. However, I want to briefly touch on some points. This is going off the general theme of introducing behavioral technology, but it could offer some insight into the situation. As of Thursday morning, health officials have confirmed at least 92,381 total cases in New York State, 2,373 deaths from the coronavirus in the state, 51,809 cases in New York City, including 1,374 deaths. This information is from Coronavirus in New York, latest updates. Let's get some numbers to get an idea of what's happening. About 2.6% of the people who contracted the coronavirus in New York State have died. About 2.7% of the people who contracted the coronavirus in New York City have died. That's bad news because people have died. However, it's good news that so far, only around 3% of those who got the coronavirus died in both New York State and New York City. Let's think about this for a moment. The way it has been portrayed is that if you get the virus, you'll die. No ifs, ands, or buts about it. Granted that it's too early to say that it's not that bad or that some people were overreacting. The numbers stayed low because the CDC and others were very proactive. However, now there is a state of panic that, according to the numbers, may not paint the whole picture and could be making things worse. For example, the shortages and strains on the hospitals. If the low death rate for coronavirus is taken into consideration, among other things, maybe someone can think of ways to help ease the strains on the hospitals. I'll be that someone. Now, I don't have the same information that the politicians or government agencies have, so my recommendation isn't based on what they know. It's just a way to calm everyone down and start brainstorming, even while the crisis is in progress. One of the first things that came to mind when I heard of the shortage of space in hospitals and strain on doctors was, what about the primary care doctors? They are trained, licensed, and have offices. If they are afraid to contaminate their offices, there are plenty of empty office buildings in any state that can serve as temporary offices during the crisis. Patients who don't have coronavirus can be treated at the doctor's office, and coronavirus patients can be treated off-site. There are also community health centers that can suspend regular visits to take coronavirus patients. Then I thought maybe some of them don't want to deal with coronavirus patients, but some probably wouldn't mind. I looked up a few articles and came upon What About Us? Frontline Primary Care Practices Fear for Survival Amid Coronavirus by Rebecca Pfeiffer. The article talks about how primary care physicians are struggling because of decreased patient visits during the coronavirus pandemic. The hospitals are also struggling because they have too many coronavirus patient visits that have interfered with their usual elective and more lucrative procedures. The article goes on to say that some primary care physicians fear that they may have to close their businesses because they aren't making enough to survive. They have asked for some of the stimulus funds that are going to the hospitals. Quote, some of the stimulus work is going to be helpful to the system overall, but frankly, nothing against hospitals. But if you want to help hospitals, you should be investing in primary care in their communities. If a practice closes, that's 20, 30, 40 more ER visits for them to deal with. Primary care practices warn that if they're allowed to close, that would lower the nation's capacity to detect outbreaks and raise the burden on hospitals while restricting access for patients struggling with non-COVID-19 conditions and other day-to-day ailments. End quote. With that information, can you think of some solutions? I'll give you a minute. Do you see where I'm going? The primary care physicians are licensed and could be easily trained to deal with coronavirus patients. The hospitals are overwhelmed. The primary care physicians need more patient visits. The hospitals need less patient visits. The death rate of the coronavirus is currently only around 3%. Here's my idea. When someone finds out that she or he has tested positive for coronavirus, send them to a primary care physician to see how serious it is, how serious it could be, or how serious it could get. Don't let them run to the emergency room first because the hospitals will be overwhelmed. The primary care physician should have a quarantine space to see these patients and should have all kinds of protective gear on so that they don't contract the coronavirus. After the primary care doctor does a checkup, they can treat the less severe cases and monitor them while sending the severe cases to the emergency room. The primary care physicians can extend their hours to accommodate an influx of patients who test positive for coronavirus. Maybe some primary care physicians or nurses don't want to do this, but there are probably some who do. Don't force anyone, and see which primary care physicians and nurses are willing to do this. As I'm writing this, nothing like that has been explored. Hopefully, by the time you read this, something like this will be in place if it could help the situation. Back to the general theme and scenario. As said before, the CDC was mentioned not to make it look like the Center for Population Control, CPC, but because it is the Center for Disease Control, CDC, it was a government agency that fit the scenario. In this article, I ventured away from exploring the implications of a machine-operated mind and body to exploring the implications of a machine-operated society. If that scenario really happened, the CDC would use a computer software that would predict the spread of an outbreak, calculate the risk, and point out the most vulnerable regions using demographics and other inputs. A machine would indirectly control the CDC's decisions because the people at the CDC will base their decisions on what the computer software machine reports. This isn't too scary considering the computer is making calculations that a human can easily make. However, what if smart computers are used, left to make their own decisions, and are treated as independent disease control auditors? Then the computer is making the decisions with little human input. That's where the tech nerds seem to be going with AI and other technology. Soon, computers might run and control society. With the current American political scene in shambles, people might actually welcome that as an unbiased and factual option. Part of my research involves observing extreme psychopaths. These people are predators and a danger to all life on Earth. They have this obsessive need to control anything and everybody around them. They are also sneaky and underhanded. If psychopaths found out that a computer-based political system was accepted, they would want to be the ones programming the computers. People fell into line quickly during the coronavirus pandemic. The quarantine was an effective control method in New York and California, two of the most populated and most famous cities in America. The quarantine even messed with Texas. With those three states falling in line, every other state would be easier to control. Contagious disease could be used as the new population control tool. Many things are being sorted out during the current pandemic, and other things are being put in place. There is a new homeschool being tested out during the pandemic. Primary schools are figuring out ways to teach classes online. With bullying and the rise of school shootings, this may be a reasonable option to traditional schooling. The school building can become a thing of the past. Classes can be taught online, and parents can control who their kids socialize with in person. The kids can have virtual classrooms from their bedrooms and play with their circle of friends afterwards. It's currently said that money can temporarily carry the coronavirus. What if the government decides to stop making money for safety reasons? Every transaction will be done online or with cards. That means financial accounts can be put on hold whenever it is necessary to keep certain people in line. Since they will have no cash on hand, they have to comply or be denied access to their own money. If the government decided to get rid of cash, it would demand that all cash be deposited in a bank account because cash will no longer be accepted anywhere else. Furthermore, cash will only be accepted by banks for a limited time, and after that time, it will not be accepted except under strenuous circumstances. There will be an application and lengthy process to have a bank accept cash into an account after the deadline. The process will be deliberately complicated and lengthy so that most people would rather make the deposits on time rather than go through it. Food could be rationed. At first, that didn't seem possible in America, so I decided to leave it out of this article. Then I went to the grocery store during the coronavirus pandemic. I bought my usual items in multiple quantities and went to the self-checkout. While checking out, I scanned one item and another of the same item. When I scanned the second item, the machine stopped. The light for the assistant automatically started blinking, and I couldn't scan anything else. The assistant came over and found the reason for the delay was that I scanned more than one of the same item. There was a limit of one item per order. I asked if I had to do several separate orders to get more of the item, and she responded that it was only one item per person. I didn't argue and proceeded only to find out that there was another item that I could only buy one per visit. I understood why the grocery store had to do that and didn't give the assistant a hard time. I was at the grocery store during the day, but I usually went at night after work. The first few times I found empty shelves or a store that closed early because most of the food was sold out. I appreciated that the grocery store was doing this to make sure everybody was able to get food. After that experience, I realized that rationing food in America was possible and decided to briefly talk about it in this article. I have a strange feeling that this won't be the last time that there will be a mass quarantine. The machines can come in to help calculate food supply needed and the supply to be put on reserve. The cash registers can stop anyone who tries to break rationing rules during the mass quarantines. Companies like Amazon can benefit from the increase in online orders. There has been an increase in the building of Amazon centers to deliver items so no one has to leave their homes. This makes it easy to have mainly online transactions. Nearby delivery centers mean that someone could order something online and have it delivered same day or next day. Quick shipping makes happy customers. This can also make it easier to control what people buy and who buys what. Since it is not a store where things are on the shelves and anyone can go pick up any item, it's easier to make something unavailable to certain people. It also makes it easier to promote certain products and items, a way to further control what people buy. Then there are the terrorists. The coronavirus effectively shut down major cities and parts of the world. It was like a war and recession in one with less hassle. If terrorists are watching, then they are probably seeing a new terror method. Of course, they could grow and use old viruses to launch pandemics, but what if they wanted something more high tech so they don't end up catching the virus? What if they want to bioengineer a virus or other microorganisms because the natural viruses are hard to control? Those microbes have a mind of their own and could end up harming the terrorists as much as their enemies. It is possible to use a computer to develop, deposit, and control a microbe. If you don't believe me, then look into it yourself. If I gave you the background on mechanically engineered microbes right now, this article will be too long. If you look into it, feel free to share what you find out in the comment section of the YouTube video for this article. It is possible that current conditions can lead to a machine, computer, operated society in the future. While this article could have appeared as an absurd conspiracy theory before the coronavirus, it is obvious now that these scenarios are very possible. Exploring the implications of a machine operated society and opening up the discussion now can help to avoid future issues and set guidelines to protect individual freedom. In this way, America will remain free and not have a semblance of the freedom it once had.